James Miller and Lisa Carter thought it was just another late-night visit to McDonald's, but what happened in that empty parking lot would change their lives forever. One would never walk out alive, and the other would be haunted by secrets that no one could have predicted. It was a typical Friday night in the small town, the kind of night where most people stayed home after a long work week, and the streets were quiet except for the occasional car passing by. The McDonald's on Main Street, a place normally bustling during lunch hours and weekend mornings, was nearly empty. The golden arches glowed softly against the dark sky, casting a warm, inviting light over the empty parking lot. Inside, the employees moved with practiced efficiency. One was wiping down tables while another restocked the ketchup packets. The smell of fries and burger patties lingered in the air, familiar and comforting, the kind of aroma that usually reassured customers they were in a safe, ordinary place. Only a few cars were parked outside, some customers in the drive-thru, the hum of the deep fryer in the background. Among them was a man sitting alone in his car, idly scrolling on his phone while waiting for his order. His presence seemed normal, routine, unremarkable in every way. Yet, something about the way he parked and lingered in the lot caught the attention of one of the employees. But it was easy to dismiss. McDonald's saw hundreds of customers every day, and most left without incident. Suddenly, the calm was shattered, a piercing siren cut through the night, followed by flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the asphalt. Patrons inside the restaurant looked up, startled as police cars pulled into the parking lot with urgency. Officers jumped out, moving swiftly toward the parked car near the drive-thru, their faces tense, expressions grim. The man who had seemed so ordinary moments before was now the center of a scene that no one in the restaurant could have imagined. Inside the car, the man's body slumped over the steering wheel, a shocking sight that sent a ripple of fear and confusion through the small group of people who had remained in the restaurant. At first, some assumed it was a medical emergency, perhaps a sudden heart attack or fainting spell. But as the officers examined the scene, it became clear that this was far from ordinary. There were signs of a struggle, subtle yet unmistakable, evidence that someone had deliberately caused the man's death. The drive-thru cameras, which had captured every moment of the evening, quickly became the focus of the investigation. Review of the footage revealed something chilling. A shadowy figure had lingered near the victim's car in the minutes leading up to the discovery. The person moved with deliberate care, always staying just out of clear view of the camera. The footage was grainy, but the figure's presence was undeniable, a ghost-like silhouette moving silently, watching, waiting. As the news spread, the small town was thrown into shock. McDonald's, a place that had always felt safe, a familiar stop for late-night snacks and casual meals, suddenly seemed different. Fear settled over the community, subtle but pervasive, as residents began to realize that the tragedy had occurred right in their midst. This was no random accident, no fleeting moment of misfortune. Something darker had unfolded in the parking lot that night, something that would soon unravel a chain of secrets, suspicions, and revelations that no one could have anticipated. The quiet Friday night had turned into the beginning of a story that would grip the town, one that started with a single, tragic death but promised to reveal far more than anyone could have imagined. Investigators worked through the night, combing every inch of the parking lot and the surrounding areas, searching for any clue that could explain what had happened. The drive-thru cameras were the first place they turned, reviewing hours of footage with painstaking attention to detail. At first glance, the video appeared ordinary. Cars arrived and departed, employees moved behind the counters, and customers collected their meals without incident. But when the footage was slowed and examined frame by frame, a disturbing pattern emerged. A shadowy figure appeared repeatedly near the victim's car, always careful to remain partially hidden. Sometimes it lingered in the corner of the frame, at other times it moved quickly, just out of direct sight of the camera. There was a precision to the movements, a deliberate awareness of the surveillance, as if the person knew exactly what they were doing and how to avoid detection. Forensic teams scoured the scene for physical evidence. They found fingerprints that did not match the victim, a small, torn piece of clothing caught on the car door, and traces of a mysterious substance on the ground nearby. Each discovery added another layer of mystery, but none led to a clear suspect. The materials appeared carefully left, almost staged, as if the killer had intentionally provided misleading clues to confuse investigators. The precision and planning suggested someone who had thought through every possible detail, someone who could anticipate the police's moves before they even began. The town itself began to feel the tension of the investigation. Word spread quickly, carried in whispers and news alerts. Customers hesitated to visit the restaurant, and employees felt the weight of suspicion, even if they had no connection to the crime. McDonald's, once a place of routine comfort, now carried an invisible sense of danger. Residents drove by slowly at night, glancing at the parking lot as if expecting to see something out of place, something that might hint at the presence of the mysterious figure captured on the cameras. As the investigation progressed, detectives began to map out the timeline of events leading up to the murder. They analyzed traffic patterns, customer arrivals, and employee schedules, attempting to understand how the killer had managed to move unnoticed. Every detail seemed insignificant on its own, but together they painted a picture of meticulous planning. The person behind the murder had clearly studied the location, learned the habits of the staff, and waited for the perfect opportunity. The randomness that many assumed was part of the incident was, in fact, an illusion. In addition to physical evidence, investigators explored digital footprints. Phone records, social media activity, and online transactions were examined for connections between the victim and potential suspects. Slowly, patterns began to emerge, subtle and almost imperceptible, suggesting the presence of someone with a personal motive. It became clear that the murder was not just a violent act in a public place, but the result of carefully orchestrated intent, a crime planned with patience and executed with precision. The deeper the investigators dug, the more complicated the case became, revealing layers of secrecy and deception that no one in the town had anticipated. Each new discovery brought more questions than answers, drawing the police and the community further into a web of suspense and uncertainty, leaving everyone to wonder who could commit such a calculated act in a place so familiar, so ordinary. Attention soon turned to the employees who had worked the late shift that night. Detectives conducted thorough interviews, reviewing each worker's background and scrutinizing their movements within the restaurant. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Most had clean records and no apparent connection to the victim. But one employee's past raised questions. Years earlier, they had been arrested for a minor but violent offense, though it had been considered an isolated incident, and they had since maintained a quiet, unremarkable life. Still, the police couldn't ignore the possibility that someone with knowledge of the restaurant's routines and blind spots could have used it to carry out the crime. Every employee became a subject of investigation, each movement within the store mapped and compared to surveillance footage, and each explanation weighed carefully against the evidence. The investigators also examined the victim's life outside of the restaurant. At first, the man seemed ordinary, someone who blended into the background of the small town. But as detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a secret side of his life that no one had suspected. He had been involved in a clandestine business, small scale and hidden from friends and family, operating in the shadows of the community. It was not something that could be traced easily, but its discovery suggested a motive for murder beyond a random act of violence. The victim's secrecy hinted at someone who might have had reason to target him, someone who knew about these hidden dealings and wanted to stop him. The combination of the employee's past and the victim's hidden life created a complex puzzle. Investigators began to consider that the crime might have been carefully orchestrated from within, planned by someone familiar with the environment and the victim's routines. The timing, the method, and the way the killer avoided detection all pointed to premeditation. The meticulous execution suggested a calculated mind, someone who observed, waited, and struck when the opportunity was perfect. As police pieced together the timeline, the picture of the evening became increasingly intricate. They discovered that the victim had arrived at the restaurant at a precise time when the parking lot was nearly empty, minimizing witnesses. The killer, aware of these conditions, had carefully planned the approach and escape, leaving behind only the subtle, almost imperceptible clues that investigators now had to interpret. Each piece of evidence seemed designed to mislead, creating a sense of randomness where there was none. The town watched the investigation with growing unease. People who had once considered the McDonald's a safe, familiar place now hesitated to visit, especially at night. Rumors and speculation spread quickly, each new theory adding to the atmosphere of fear and suspicion. Families, friends, and neighbors all wondered if the killer was someone they knew, someone who could move among them without drawing attention. The more the police uncovered about the victim's secret life, the more the case appeared to be motivated not by chance but by a personal vendetta, a calculated act of revenge carried out with precision. Detectives realized that solving the crime would require understanding not just the actions of the night, but the hidden relationships and motives that had brought them to that point. The investigation was no longer just about a murder at a familiar restaurant. It was about unraveling a complex network of secrecy, betrayal, and carefully guarded truths. Each new discovery added another layer of suspense, pushing the investigators closer to uncovering the shocking reality behind the seemingly ordinary life of the victim. Weeks passed with little progress, leads went cold, and the case seemed to stall, leaving investigators frustrated and the town anxious. Then a break arrived in the most unexpected way. A nearby business, a small convenience store located just a block away from McDonald's, had surveillance cameras that faced the street. The footage, initially overlooked, revealed the shadowy figure captured in the McDonald's cameras once again. But this time, the angle offered a clearer view. The figure moved with familiar caution, trying to remain unnoticed, but the camera captured details that had been invisible before: gestures, posture, even a glimpse of clothing that matched the torn fragment found at the original scene. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation. For the first time, police realized that the killer was not a stranger lurking randomly in the parking lot. The person had intimate knowledge of the victim's movements and timing, moving with a confidence that came from familiarity rather than chance. Detectives began cross-referencing this new footage with the earlier McDonald's tapes, examining the angles, the timing, and the patterns. It became clear that the individual had planned each step carefully, almost as if they had studied the environment and anticipated every possible obstacle. As the pieces began to fall into place, a chilling realization emerged. The killer was someone the victim knew, someone they trusted. The case, initially thought to be a random, senseless act of violence, was now revealed to be personal, driven by motive and revenge. The investigation shifted focus from random suspicion to uncovering hidden relationships, examining every interaction the victim had in the days and weeks leading up to the murder. Friends, acquaintances, and colleagues became subjects of scrutiny. Detectives worked tirelessly to untangle the web of connections, looking for signs of betrayal or resentment that might explain the calculated attack. The town, meanwhile, was gripped by fear and disbelief. The idea that the murderer could be someone familiar, someone who had moved through the community unnoticed, unsettled everyone. People began to question the people around them, wondering if the friendly neighbor, the co-worker, or the seemingly ordinary acquaintance could hide such darkness. The familiarity of the town, once comforting, now felt threatening, and even routine errands carried an undercurrent of unease. Evidence collected at the scene, previously thought minor or inconclusive, suddenly gained new significance. The fingerprint, the torn piece of clothing, and traces of the mysterious substance all began to connect to the individual revealed in the new footage. Detectives realized that what had seemed like careless mistakes or random traces were actually subtle hints, deliberate actions designed to mislead investigators while leaving just enough evidence to tie the killer to the crime if examined closely. The investigation now had direction, a sense of inevitability. The focus on a known individual, someone with a motive, narrowed the search and intensified the scrutiny. Every detail, every observation, every minor discrepancy became critical. The case, once stalled and murky, began to reveal the chilling truth. This was not just a murder but a calculated act of betrayal. Someone close to the victim had orchestrated every moment, striking at the perfect time and almost escaping detection entirely. The realization that the killer had been so near all along, invisible in plain sight, transformed the story from a puzzling crime into a haunting revelation that would shock the town and everyone following the case. The breakthrough came quietly but decisively. After days of painstaking analysis, detectives were able to match the fingerprint found on the car door to a local resident, someone who had been in the town for years without raising suspicion. The torn piece of clothing, once considered a minor clue, was traced back to the same individual through a combination of fiber analysis and purchase records. Even the mysterious substance discovered at the scene, which had puzzled forensic experts, was linked to materials the suspect had access to in their daily life. Each piece of evidence, once isolated and ambiguous, now formed an undeniable chain pointing directly to the perpetrator. Arresting the suspect was tense but orderly. There was no struggle, no dramatic confrontation. The individual, confronted with the mounting evidence, remained calm, almost detached, as if aware that their careful planning had finally unraveled. Detectives meticulously documented every step of the arrest, knowing that the details of the procedure and the evidence collected would be crucial in court. The town, which had been living in a state of fear and uncertainty, felt a mixture of relief and shock. The person responsible for the calculated murder had been living among them, their presence unnoticed until the truth emerged. The trial revealed the full extent of the plot. The court learned that the murder had been motivated by betrayal, a deep and personal grievance that had festered over time. The suspect had observed the victim, learning their routines, understanding their habits, and choosing the perfect moment to strike. It was a plan executed with precision and patience, a methodical approach that left little room for error. Prosecutors presented evidence showing the meticulous preparation, the timing of the murder, the manipulation of the environment, and the careful handling of physical traces to avoid immediate detection. Each revelation painted a picture of a crime that was deliberate and chilling in its foresight. As the trial unfolded, the community grappled with the realization that the violence had not been random. The McDonald's, once a symbol of normalcy and comfort, had become the stage for a personal vendetta, a crime rooted in human emotion and calculated decision-making. The story of the murder captivated the town and beyond, drawing attention to the complexities of trust, secrecy, and the hidden motives that can exist beneath seemingly ordinary lives. The trial not only exposed the facts of the crime, but also forced the community to confront the unsettling idea that danger could exist in familiar places and that appearances could be deceiving. Ultimately, justice was served. The suspect was convicted, held accountable for the calculated act that had shattered the peace of the town. The case left a lasting impression, not just because of the crime itself, but because of the lessons it carried. The McDonald's murder became a story that reminded everyone of the fragility of safety, the hidden layers of human behavior, and the consequences of betrayal. In the aftermath, the town slowly returned to its routines, but the memory of that night lingered, a haunting reminder that even the most ordinary places could become the setting for extraordinary tragedy. The case remained in the minds of the town's people, a sobering testament to the darkness that can hide behind familiar faces and everyday life.